I'm Jasmine Birtles, and I'm thrilled to be able to say that I'm going to be joined today by former MP Andrew Bridgen. Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. What a time to be alive. So on. And despite the efforts that the establishment have put into their narratives, they're all crumbling, Yasmin. And the people are waking up.
Are you're really feeling that? Because I'm feeling that people are waking up. I'm not sure how many are waking up to the harms of the vaccine, but many are waking up to the harms of lockdown, I think. But you're finding that there are a lot of people waking up now, are you?
Yes. I mean, we had a conservative government in the UK which did nothing conservative for 5 years, handed the baton over to a supposedly Labour government. And maybe that's what it's taking to demonstrate to the public that it doesn't matter which party they put into power or which prime minister, that they're not working on the people's behalf. Indeed, our democracy is currently being usurped, and I think there's a growing agreement that things are seriously, seriously wrong. And it doesn't really matter what's stimulating people to wake up, whether it's the madness that's the non-scientific madness of net zero, whether it's the vaccine harms and the pandemic response, whether it's the threat of the WHO seizing our sovereignty. The lies we're being told about the various conflicts around the world. It doesn't matter which party in our parliament currently, that they're all on the same narrative on all the big issues. And of course, taxes will be going up again shortly in the budget from a record high under a so-called conservative government where we were at a 70-year high, and taxes will rise again. And I think, when you've got a Labour government who Keir Starmer promised the people before the election that he was going to cut energy costs to the average household by £400. And what he's actually done within weeks is remove the winter fuel allowance from our pensioners. And on the 1st of October, he hit them with the double whammy of allowing energy prices to rise by 9%, which is amazingly, hugely above inflation. So maybe that's what it's going to take. And as tough as things are, I always think that, in fact, the worse things get, you have to take great solace in the fact that we are nearer to the end.
Yeah, so there are a few things to unpack there. Firstly, I don't know that you've got some court cases potentially on the go. Where are we with those, and what are they?
Okay, well, I'm basically being engaged in lawfare, so I've got about 5 legal cases on at the moment.
Wow.
At various stages. And one of them, obviously, is my libel case against Matt Hancock. That the next hearing on that will be the 26th of November, which is a CMC, that's case management hearing, and we should then be able to get the date for the final hearing. And I just think that, quite honestly, the amount of information from around the world that's coming out indicating adversely against the efficacy and safety of the so-called COVID-19 vaccines. And I recently spoke to Russell Broadbent, the Australian MP, who's written to their Prime Minister calling for an immediate halt due to the DNA contamination, the risks of illness and cancer induction from those. I think in the next few months, I think the vaccine harms are going to be exposed publicly.
Really?
I don't think the mainstream media can hold the cracks in the dam back much longer.
Well, I was going to say that there's still very little in the mainstream media. We've seen little tiny bits in the Telegraph, kind of right-wing press, maybe, a tiny bit in GB News, but on the whole, it's still being dampened down. But you think they can't keep going now for the next few months?
Well, we've got a very important election in America, which is going to affect the whole of the developed world, the free world, supposedly. And clearly, the polls are indicating that Trump is well ahead. I think it was very interesting that only yesterday, at Kamala Harris's own rally in Detroit, the crowd at her rally started chanting for Trump. Uh, Obviously, there are major suspicions that there may have been some skullduggery in election fraud in the 2020 presidential election, which I called out at the time and was called a conspiracy theorist. I think if you were minded to try and fix this election, I think it's going to be too overwhelming for them to fix. And clearly, I was delighted when Robert Kennedy Jr. Threw in behind the Trump campaign. And if he is placed in a position of power in the new regime, I don't think it'll take long to expose what's been going on, perpetrated mainly by Big Pharma. And that's going to be a revelation. And I think that the mainstream media, or the legacy media, shall we call it, because they're not mainstream anymore because no one watches them. The legacy media in the UK will have to adjust its position for a sort of soft release that they've been inadvertently misleading us for a number of years. And of course, I don't believe it is inadvertently. I think they're bought and paid for. So all the plates are moving. It is an exciting time to be alive. And I think we're going to win through.
And you say that you've got other projects on the go. How do you feel the situation is in the country now when it comes to, as you've also mentioned, net zero, the World Economic Forum, democracy, free speech? Where are we with those issues? We've talked about the
right. Well, I just think they're issues that no one wants to talk about in Parliament. The last week, I remember, well, the only debates we've had on the World Health Organization's pandemic agreement, which is an agreement which, if we signed up to it, will basically allow the Director General of the WHO, who's unelected, unaccountable, nobody who works for the WHO or the UN pay tax, and they've got diplomatic immunity from prosecution for any of their actions. I mean, Jasmine, what could possibly go wrong giving them overarching powers over our democracy and the democracy or otherwise of every nation state in the world?
And they're trying to keep it quiet. I know. So
they don't want to talk about it. And it was very telling the last week before the election. The only debates we've had in Parliament about the WHO treaty and the amendments to the international health regulations, which, if implemented, would make the sovereignty we gave up in joining the European Union look like a paragon of democratic virtue. I mean, these are totalitarian powers to enforce people of this nation to be locked in their homes, forced to take mandatory untested medication at the whim of an individual who was only placed in power in head of the WHO by an unholy alliance of Bill Gates and the Chinese Communist Party. And I remember at the time our government objected to his appointment. So why would you want to give him powers over the top of our Parliament just to decide what my former constituents and everyone else in the country can do? And you're giving him the power to call a public health emergency of international concern, which will give him these overarching powers, supranational powers, and also the ability to say when the emergency is over and gives the powers back to our sovereign parliaments. Well, giving the power to someone to decide when they take massive powers and when they're over, do you think we'll be having more emergencies or less? And of course, under the new treaties, this emergency he can call is not just for a human pathogen, a pandemic. It could be for an animal pathogen or an environmental risk, too much carbon dioxide. You might have to have an economic lockdown because he decides that that's important. I mean, these are unprecedented powers and a complete betrayal of the people by any elected representative anywhere in the world to give these powers away, because quite honestly, they're not elected representatives' powers to give away. Sovereignty belongs to the people.
So what should we as individuals do? Should we write to our MPs? Will that make a difference? Should we do more on social media? How do we as individuals help to stop this happening?
Well, we've got to use all of those tools to raise awareness in the public, lobby the MPs so they know that people are onto it, and it's a massive issue. And as I was saying, the last week before the election was called, and no one knew it was called except for those who put bets on it, obviously, there was an urgent question in the chamber by a Conservative MP. Danny Kruger got the urgent question on the WHO treaty. And he was very telling, Jasmine, that it's the only time in the 14 years I was in Parliament that no Labour MPs at all, I can recall, turned up for an urgent question in the chamber. And I can only presume that the Labour Party whips had told them we don't want to talk about this. So there were actually no Labour MPs, apart from their front bench spokesman, who had to be there in a whip in the chamber for an urgent question on something which is the biggest threat to the relationship between every citizen in the world and their government. Not a small issue, a huge issue. And that can only be by design. They were told not to. And I'm absolutely convinced, having listened to Labour front bench spokespeople speak in 2 debates by public petition, only in our Parliament on this, and that urgent question, that the Labour government will let it all go through and probably not even want to have a debate in our Parliament on it. Certainly they're maintaining that the amendments to the international health regulations, which are draconian, they're saying that's only amending a current treaty, so we don't need to even have a debate and vote on it in the chamber of the House of Commons. And that was very much, I believe, the feeling of the previous Conservative government as well. And the fact that there's deathly silence in the legacy media, well, anything that no one wants to talk about, whether that's vaccine harms, excess deaths, the WHO, net zero, that's a red flag, isn't it?
And so finally, Andrew, I'm getting the idea from you that we as individuals need to step up. We need to step up for the children, for the grandchildren. We need to step up for the world. I mean, it goes together with what I'm seeing, an increasing desire for direct democracy, more referenda, more of individuals, voters taking part and holding people to account, holding MPs to account, holding the unelected bodies to account as well. Do you feel that that's what we need to be doing now?
Well, very sadly, the change that we're going to need, halting what's been going on and perpetrated against the people, it's going to have to come from the ground up. I've completely lost any faith that the place that should be protecting the people, our Parliament with our elected representatives, and bear in mind that the symbol of Parliament is the portcullis, Jasmine, the last defence of the keep, the defence of democracy, I was told. It's not going to come from there. There's no one speaking about any of these issues in that chamber of the House of Commons. It's going to have to come from the bottom up. If it were up to me, if I were in power, yes, sweeping change. It's clear the current so-called democratic system is not working to protect the interests of the people on so many issues. It would appear that it's been usurped by big business and very powerful individuals around the world. And you'll note that Bill Gates was again flying in the other day and speaking to the Prime Minister. Yep. Keir Starmer said that was interviewed when he was in opposition, and he was asked whether he preferred Davos or Westminster after his whole cabinet returned from their meeting with the World Economic Forum in Davos, and he said he preferred Davos because, and I quote, "I can do business with these people." Well, I put it to your listeners that the Prime Minister of this country or the leader of the opposition, he has no business doing business with these people. Bill Gates is a foreign national. He's one of the richest people in the world with huge influence through his so-called philanthropic donations. He must be the least successful philanthropist in the world because every year he gets richer, despite he can't give the money away fast enough. What he's actually doing is shielding his investments from tax through a trust fund, which gives him enormous scope to influence politicians around the world. if it was up to me, I would get rid of the House of Lords tomorrow. I think they're not even required to be re-elected. They're peers for life. They can speak out on issues, and they have failed to do so. I would halve the number of MPs we've got. I'd pay them more, and I would ban them for having any external interest while they're elected representatives of the people. So I'd probably halve the number of MPs and get the Commons chamber to produce legislation and move to a direct democracy model and people will think this will be a pain. Every 3 months we'd have to have public debate and the public would vote on all the laws that effectively become the second chamber. Democracy comes from the old Greek, and demos is the people and kratos is the power. Well, how powerful do the people really feel in this country or other countries, supposedly in a democracy? This would bring real power back to the people. It would force the people to be engaged in the laws that will affect them. Because when we've sorted this mess out, and I believe we will, it will be over, and I believe we'll be successful, and the truth will come out. I don't want to be in a position, or anyone in this country to be in a position where the power can be usurped by dark forces again. And I think the best protection from that is people say you're going to have to get more involved in governing your own country. And some people have said to me, I'm not interested in politics. Well, the problem is that the politicians are very interested in you.
Yeah. So if we don't do it, then if we don't act, we will be acted upon. That's the way I feel.
Well, also, if we don't act, we're effectively complicit. If you watch a crime being perpetrated and do nothing, I mean, you're not completely innocent yourself. We don't need everybody, but those who can and those we must act. And I think the time for that's going to be approaching very, very quickly.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much for all that information and for the kick up the bum, frankly, for us to all get on and act and take part.
Well, I think people think we're being oppressed. Well, and it's true. But who are our oppressors? Effectively, the way governments seek to intimidate us now is they expect us to oppress ourselves. And once you realise that, there's a lot of freedom out there, and I would like the next generations to have freedom. And if we don't act, they're not going to have it.
Great. Well, thank you, Andrew. Andrew Bridgen, former MP, current fighter. Thank you very much for coming along. We'll have you on again in a few months' time, see how things are going, and see how else we can work together to put our country back on the map. Thank you so much.